Greetings and welcome to the Cancer Interviews podcast. I'm your host, Bruce Morton. On this segment, we are honored to have as our guest Dusty Baker of Sacramento, California. Dusty Baker is well known as a Major League Baseball player and manager, which we will briefly address, but the primary reason for his appearance is an opportunity for him to share with you his journey of prostate cancer. So here he is, Dusty Baker. And Dusty, welcome to Cancer Interviews.
Hey, Bruce. Hey, so we've been talking about this for quite a few years now. And so, now we get to finally talk about it.
Yes, and what a great thing it is that we have been cancer-free for some time. And I want to get to that with your journey. Now, before we start on that, just so people can learn a little bit more about you, and please understand some of the people viewing this cancer interview are not baseball fans, so they're going to be hearing your name and your voice for the first time. But I have firsthand knowledge that right about the time you chose to pursue baseball, you were a pretty good basketball player, but you chose baseball. Why?
Well, actually, baseball chose me. And, I believe that, and I prayed upon it because I had a number of football scholarships and basketball scholarships, a couple track scholarships, and none in baseball, not a one. And so the Braves said that they could take that talent, even though I was playing baseball, and just concentrate on one sport, that I could be, a good baseball player and be on a fast track. And that same year, my parents got divorced, which has been kind of a theme, in my life. Whenever I was at a crossroads or making a major decision, just like when I started coaching, I was getting divorced at that same time, and I was the oldest of five. And then when my mom and dad separated, my dad, was a guy who worked two jobs for 30-something years. My mom was a secretary, and then she was a school teacher after she went back to school. The economic spokes of the wheel, was off, by my dad getting a $300 or $400, apartment. And I was like, well, I didn't want to be an economic burden. I wanted to help my mom and dad and my brothers and sisters that were coming up shortly thereafter behind me. And the night before the draft, I prayed that the Lord would not let me get drafted by the Atlanta Braves. And then the next morning, 2 days later, I was in the last day of the draft. I was 25th round, only 26 rounds. The Braves called and said I was drafted by the Braves. And so I was like, oh no. I was like, Lord, you didn't hear me, because at that time, there's a lot of racial unrest in our country. There was nonconformity on all fronts. Everything was anti-Vietnam. When I was out here, in Northern California, and, hanging around Berkeley and Golden Gate Park and stuff like that. So it was like, and reading and hearing about things in the Ebony and Sepia and on the news, with freedom marches, and most of them are centered in the South. And I didn't want to go to the South. But that was the best thing that happened to me, because Hank Aaron promised my mother that he would take care of me. I signed in Dodger Stadium with the Braves. Tommy Davis was my favorite player, who I was watched since I was a kid. And Hank promised my mother that if I had confidence in myself, that I could be in the big leagues by the time my class would have graduated from college, then go ahead and sign. And if I didn't think so, then go to school and then take a chance and sign in later. And so I prayed upon it, and it said that my answer was the next day I signed with the Braves. And it's been a great journey. That was perhaps one of the best decisions that I've ever made, because I got to, Hank promised, like, he kept his promise. He made me go to church. He made me get up. I was in the big leagues at 19 years old, and I was closer in age to his kids than I was to him and my teammates, other than probably Ralph Garr. And Ralph was still about 3 or 4 years older than me. So, that's how everything started. And that's why I played baseball. And basketball was my first love. And I really didn't fall in love with baseball until like 1976, when I hurt my knee playing basketball in the off season, and it was almost taken from me. And so then and only then did I fall in love with baseball, and I start seeing some of the things Hank Aaron told me about, or some of the idiosyncrasies of baseball that I never really noticed because I wasn't in love with it. But once I fell in love with it and it was almost taken from me, then I saw things that I didn't see before.
Numerous highlights in your baseball career as a player and a manager. We don't have time to go over all of them, but I do want to revisit one. Hank Aaron, the aforementioned Hank Aaron, hit his historic 715th home run in April 1974, breaking Babe Ruth's record. And when that ball was hit, there were a handful of players who were on the field between the lines. There were a few more players who were in the dugouts, the Dodgers and the Braves. There were 50,000 people at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, and who knows how many thousands more who weren't there but said they were. And there was a national TV audience. But out of all that, there was only one guy who was in the on-deck circle when that happened, and that guy was you. So if you would, revisit that night and that experience from your unique vantage point.
Well, I mean, it was a very unseasonably cold night in Atlanta. The coldest night that I can remember ever being in Atlanta in April. And Hank told me he was going to get it over with. And he used to try to school me sometime, and I didn't know what he was doing. I thought he was predicting, like Muhammad Ali, which round he was going to knock a guy out in. But he would tell me, hey, this guy's going to throw me a slider low and away, and I'm going to hit it over the right field fence. So this guy's going to, I'm going to set him up to have him throw me a fastball inside. And he just told me, he said, Dusty, I'm going to get this over with like right now. And I said, okay, Hank. And Al Downing, who ended up being my teammate, threw the pitch, and he hit it over the left field fence. But if you notice some of the videos, I could have been the first guy there to congratulate him, but I thought that was Hank's moment. I didn't want to, be in the shot because that was his moment, and that's something that you realize it was historic, but I didn't realize the magnitude of the event until probably years later. You know what I mean? And he's one of the greatest men that I've been around. Him and my father and a couple coaches I had on the way were the most influential men, in my life that, kept me straight and kept me, taught me things on the field and off the field.
Well, that's a nice segue into the next thing I wanted to ask about Hank Aaron's home run. Dusty, with many things that happen in our lives, with the passage of time, we gain a different perspective about that particular thing. This is close to half a century later. At this point, do you have a different perspective, a different appreciation for that experience?
Well, I got a different appreciation, as each day passes. I'm more and more thankful for things that I've been through, good and bad, which builds character in you. And it also builds hope, and it builds faith in you and as well as mankind, I think. And faith in mankind is probably the thing that people are losing the most. When you're hearing about shootings, and you're hearing about just different things that tragic things, and it's almost like people have become immune to tragedy. And, actually, it's like I said, it's made me more appreciative of my kids, make me more appreciative of life, of my health. When you see guys passing in the last years or so, I'm thinking about Jimmy Wynn and Hank Aaron and, Dick Allen and, Bob Watson. I mean, J.R. Richard and, Al Kaline. I mean, some of the guys that were very influential in my life, when I look on my walls at home, and I got Willie Stargell and Larry Doby and Joe Black and, all these guys that were, and Buck O'Neill, guys that helped me become the man that I am and encouraged me to pass it on to somebody else. And when I think about my dad, I remember I wasn't going to be, I didn't want to coach. And then my dad told me that, the Lord wouldn't have given me the wisdom and knowledge to being around the guys that taught me this wisdom and knowledge, to take it off to the hills and live with it by myself. And it wasn't mine to possess, that it was mine to pass on, hopefully, to others, and they can pass on to somebody else.
By the way, if you like what you hear on this segment, we invite you to subscribe to our podcast by clicking the links below. Once there, you'll see a bell icon, and if you click on that, we will notify you when we post a new interview. Now, Dusty, as for your cancer journey, everybody who goes on a cancer journey, they're at a point in which things seem to be okay, and then something happens that tips them off that something isn't quite right. For you, what was that? What led you to believe that, again, something wasn't quite right?
Well, actually, nothing tipped me off. And, what happened was I was doing some public service announcement for prostate cancer because of my dad. And my dad had prostate cancer like 8 to 9 years prior to me. And so I was doing these PSAs for men to go get tested because, men won't do like women. Most of the time women will go get a mammogram and go to the doctor. But, us hard ass men, this is so to speak, we think we're infallible and you got to be really, really sick to go to the doctor. And so once my dad started going, getting his prostate, treatments, and, he had to go through, different, I don't think he went through radiation. He went through some hormonal treatments or something at that time. And it wasn't nearly as progressive as it is now. And so I started taking, charting my own because of my dad. And then I found out that my uncles died of prostate cancer and my grandfathers. And then all the men in our family, like my grandfathers, I never knew them because they died before I was born in their 40s. And so, the men in my family, I found out because of my dad and my mom that they had died of prostate cancer at the time. And so I start charting it. And then, it was like 1.8. And next year it'd be 2. Next year it was 2.3. And then after about 6 or 7 years, it got up to 4.0. And so there was a doctor named Reggie Rector, who was Hank Aaron's nephew's best friend, Max. Max is a cancer doctor at University of California, University at USF. And so I went to go see Dr. Rector, and I was going duck hunting. And he says, "Hey, man, come by my office and see me." And I said, "Okay, man." So I went by and, they gave me, the biopsies, when they, take snips out of your prostate. So I went hunting, came back. And then that next week, he told me, he says, "Hey, man, you better come in." I said, "For what?" He says, "Well, you had cancerous cells in 4 out of the 8 biopsies that they snipped off. And he says a couple of them have a very high Gleason score, which correct me if I'm wrong, but, determines how aggressive the cancers are that are there." And so I went back, told my wife, I couldn't believe it, that, when they tell you that you have cancer, I mean, this is probably the most unbelievable thing. I was 52 going on 53. It was December of 2001. And my son was 2 years old at the time. My wife had just lost her mother to breast cancer a few months before that. And then she says, "Hey, man, I'm not gonna lose you as well. We got to do something about this." And then I talked to Dr. Rector, and he says, "Well, they don't tell you what to do. They give you the options, but you can tell by their eyes, kind of, or by their mannerisms, And I said, well, my Gleason scores are too high for the seeds. I was going to do the seeds. And then I didn't want radiation because I've had friends that had radiation. And so my wife said, hey, you got to get it taken out. And I said, well, I asked Dr. Rector, I said, well, if I have it taken out, what? And he says, if they'll try not to, get to the margins. And then Dr. Presti did my operation. Dr. Rector recommended Dr. Presti at Stanford. And so then they took it out. But, like at that time, they cut you from your belly, your navel, all the way down, to your penis, and they take it out. Where a few months or a few years later, they could do it robotically, which is, like I said, they've made tremendous strides. And, then this was December, and then I was cleared to go back to spring train about a week. I had a week in between because I couldn't pick up my son. They told me my son couldn't understand why I couldn't chase him anymore because they didn't want my stomach muscles, to rip. And it was challenging, but I had to make a choice. I had to make a choice, between having a life change on different things. I mean, I had to wear these pads, like a diaper for 6 months or whatever it is, because I didn't have any holding time. And then my wife, I'd get out in the middle of the road and I'd use the bathroom, or you would urinate small amounts on yourself, or if you you learn a lot about yourself. I mean, at that time, I still like to drink scotch, but I realized if I drink more than one or two, that this will just flood through you. So, you make these changes. I started eating better. I never cooked so much in my life during that winter because I was eating a bunch of tofu. I'd make tofu and collard greens and tofu and beans, and because I was doing a lot of studying on different diets and different things that would help you. And prior to my operation, I went to Hawaii, and I was on a plane, and it said, come to Kauai, which I had gone to years ago, the healing island. And so I met a lady there. My wife said, hey, man, we got to go to Kauai, and, for a couple of days because we were in Honolulu. And so we went to Kauai, saw it on the in-flight magazine, come to the Lauai Healing Center, which I went to, which I'm going to in about 10 days. And I went there, and, I'm not Buddhist, but it was a place, a very serene place where you go and you pray and just meditate and be thankful about life. And so I went there, and I after leaving there, I realized that, man, I was going to be all right. And I knew that I was going to beat it, because especially when I saw my son go over and sit down on the grass by himself. He was 2 going on 3. And he just crossed his legs and he just sat there with his eyes closed. And I didn't tell him, I didn't nothing. And so it was sort of a magical place, like I said, where I still go to, which I went to 6 years ago after I had a mild stroke. And, that's, where I go, just to, give thanks for life and give thanks for my family. And so, the most traumatic part of the whole cancer journey was the 3-month checkups, because they would check you every 3 months and you do a test, and the doctor would tell you, hey, man, I'll call you in a week, or I'll call you in 10 days. And, man, that was the worst, where I said, no, you call me back right away. You know what I mean? Because I want to know. And, some people don't want to know. But, hey, man, I want to know, just like my wife told me, hey, man, we got to get aggressive with this. and we have to attack it before it attacks you. And now I'm working on 20 years next week.
It sounds like you had a pretty good handle on all this, Dusty. What would you say was the toughest part of the aftercare? Just going in for the visits every 3 months, or the urinary function, or is there anything else that was tough about it? Because it sounds like you had a pretty good handle on it.
Well, I had a good handle on it, but it was tough. I mean, it was a psychological part of it, and also the part where I would never get up in the middle of the night to urinate. Never before this. And then I found myself in the first few months, because see, once I get up at night, my brain starts thinking about some stuff that I don't even want to think about. You know what I mean? Some people can get up and go right back to sleep. But if I get up, I'm what you call a mid-sleep insomniac. I can go to sleep quicker than any man you ever seen, Bruce. But I can't stay asleep because my brain wakes me up, for different reasons or different things. So the hardest part was when I had to get up now, from not getting up at all to getting up 3 or 4 times a night. And then I couldn't go back to sleep. I mean, it was like sleep deprivation. And that was the toughest part, just staying asleep. And, also like changing your lifestyle on things, that was the toughest part. But hey, man, I had a 2-year-old going on 3-month son. And people ask me, like, during the World Series of 2002, the reason my son was out there was because, I didn't know if that cancer was going to come back. I didn't know if it was still there. And he was 3 years old at that time of 2002. And I was trying to give my son everything that I could, in case my cancer came back, and so that's why he was out there. I was trying to give him as much as I could, even though he doesn't even remember now. He don't remember getting souped up at home plate. But, like I said, your priorities change. You think more about, life and death, and you think more about treating people right. You start exercising more. You start taking better care of yourself nutritionally. You really concentrate on really what's important in life, and realize that you're not Superman. It's real humbling, especially for an athlete that thinks that, most of us think that we're superhuman. But when something like this happens to you, and then I get calls from people, from other guys. I got a call from you. Remember, we talked about it, and Ed Randall in New York, and all kind of friends. Especially guys when they get to a certain age. I've encouraged them to go get the PSA test, to be on top of it. And early detection, is the key. You don't want to wait, and let it spread or until it's too late. Was there ever a medically related stage in this when you felt you were getting the upper hand on cancer, or did you just feel that when you went to Hawaii, or was it sort of a combination of the two? Yeah, probably a combination of the two. But after I left Hawaii, and then, like my wife, we got turtles all over the house, and turtles in my swimming pool. And, turtles are a sign. I swam with the turtle. Turtles are a sign of a long life, in Hawaiian culture. And then I really, got into Hawaiian culture. And I also got into the Native American culture, which I, befriended, the Cheyenne tribe in Montana. And I go there a lot, and I fish with them. And, we go in in a sweat teepee, and the sweat lodge in the teepee, and just become more spiritual about things and not as bothered about things. And they even, they call me Brave Eagle because I see eagles all the time. And I've seen eagles since I was a little kid. And I just see them. I don't know how. And then they gave me a couple of eagle feathers and some paintings and some sacred ornaments and bracelets and stuff. So, since, like I said, since I had cancer, I've had a whole different, awakening about myself.
Well, I hope the following is going to come across for our listeners and viewers as good news. But first of all, as you are now, about 20 years out, number one, urinary function is a big deal. Has urinary function returned to normal for you?
Almost. I mean, like I said, if I drink or something, and then it seems like to float through you. You know what I mean? But you got these Kegel exercises, just different things that you have to do to maintain, your muscles. And, and the one thing, when they did cut my stomach, people were like, oh man, you got a big belly. Well, that's because my stomach muscles, have split, and they told me I could go in and put some mesh in there and, my stomach could be flat again. But I don't say, man, I don't want any more operations if I don't have to. I've had a whole bunch of them on my wrist, on my 4 or 5 on my wrist, 3 or 4 on both knees. And so, I just live with my big belly and try to stay in the best kind of shape that I can. And, you watch your weight, you watch your diet, all these things that you do to maintain a good life and stick around. Now that I have a grandson, 20 months, so see, that's even more reason, to take care of yourself and stay on top of things.
You mentioned the diet. What are your culinary skills like? Are you still spending a lot of time in the kitchen?
Not as much. In the wintertime I do. In the wintertime I cook what I like. I have a winter crop in my garden. And when I don't have a job, I always have a summer crop. My summer crop consists of collard greens and, mustard greens. I have a bunch of tomatoes, a bunch of peppers. I'm in the wine business. I have a couple acres of grapes at my home, and then in the wintertime, which I really, I grow, broccoli, radishes, collard greens, mustard greens, kale, bok choy, just different things that my family like to eat. Or in the summertime, like I forgot my eggplant, which I can't stand, but I grew it for for them. I don't like squash, but I like most vegetables. I grow that for my daughter. So that eases my mind. And these are some of the things that my dad really liked. I have a rose garden to die for, which my dad also loved. And being the oldest, I always had to work with my dad. But now, I used to hate pulling weeds, Bruce. That was the thing I hated the most, pulling weeds. But now I can't stand weeds, and so I'm still gardening. Like my dad taught me, and I eat out of my garden, or my spices. I got rosemary, and I have some other spices that I grow outside my door, and I just go pick them when I need them. And so, it's been good.
Dusty, we're close to wrapping up. There's a place we want to go when we wrap up all of our interviews, and I'm going to go there, but I have one other question I want to touch upon real quick, and that is that you had mentioned the grapes on your property, mm-hmm. And that's part and parcel of your getting into the wine business. Would you just tell us a little bit about what you're doing where that's concerned?
Well, I got into the wine business because I was with Mondavi Wines. I was on the advisory staff, and one of the owners of the Giants, Mr. Greer, knew Robert Mondavi and knew, Mondavi sons and all of them. And then they kind of took me in, and I'd go to dinner with some of their distributors, Canandaigua, Southern Wine and Spirits, Consolation. And so, I'd go fishing in Montana a couple of times with them, and then one time in the Godbout River in Quebec. And so I had an extra 2 acres at my place, and I was like, I didn't know what to do with it. And I was like, okay, I was going to build a pond, but they said I'd flood my neighbors because it was on a slope. So a guy named Rodney Williams, who was with Mondavi, and Chick Brenneman, they helped me pick out my rootstock. And Chick's my partner now, and for 15 years, he's taught me out, when to pinch, how to, which side needs to be shaded. The south side, and the north side should be more open. When to do this, when to do that, how much water to put on them, and it's really a labor of love. But this is what I enjoy doing in my spare time, other than hunting and fishing. And I can grow about anything. So we have Baker Family Wines, which I'm going to right now to taste this year's vintage. And it's what's great is that Hank Aaron and his best friend Tom Morehouse, made me take him in as a partner. He gave me him and Tom said, "You're going to take this money." And I'm like, man, no, I don't want that responsibility. And so now we have a Hank Aaron 755 Cabernet, because that's what Hank wanted. I grow Syrah grapes at my property, but Hank wanted a bold cab, which we got the grapes from, and the juice from Mendocino. We get grapes and juice from Shenandoah Valley, from Chalk Hill, from, like I said, Mendocino, from, up in the hills up there. So we have like 9 varietals now, some white, some red, some blends, which I'm really liking. And we got Dusty's Vineyard, which is about 90 cases off my property. So it's fun. We're starting to make a little money, starting to move. Like I said, we're small, but, we deal more in quality than we do in quantity.
Excellent, Dusty. And we're all grateful. We're all better for it that you're around to do all these things in the vineyards, in the manager's office, and in the kitchen and in the garden. Now, I just want to ask you one other thing before we close, because this is the place we always want to close. Imagine that you have a private audience, a one-on-one audience with someone who has just been diagnosed with prostate cancer. If there's any one overarching bit of advice you would want to share with them, what would it be?
The power of prayer and positive thinking. I mean, I am convinced that prayer, heals all, but positive thinking, enhances that, and to be proactive versus being reactive, and it's a fight. But there have been some people that I've known that had great attitudes that survived, and there's been some people that I know that have had not bad, but negative attitudes and haven't survived.
All right, Dusty, thanks very much for sharing your story, both where cancer is concerned and a little bit where baseball is concerned. There's a lot of good information for anybody watching and listening. So, Dusty, once again, we're very appreciative of your time. Thanks so much for taking time with us.
All right, Bruton. Thanks for asking questions, and I'm hoping that, if anybody out there is listening, I hope and needs some help, that, hoping that we've helped you.
And that's a perfect segue to how we end, as this is going to wrap up this segment of Cancer Interviews, the Cancer Interviews podcast. And we want to remind you of the message that Dusty just imparted to you, that if you are on a cancer journey, or if you know someone who is, you are not alone. So thanks again. And from all of us at Cancer Interviews, we'll see you on down the road.
Thanks for joining us today. For more information, please visit us online at cancerinterviews.com. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you back here again next time on the Cancer Interviews Podcast.